So that way I can find where I live anyway. You live in Bridgeview, you live in Burbank, that's optional.
I think they already know.
They know, no, that's what I told them. When they came, I said, I don't need you. You can just leave.
So, all right, I wanted to go over, like, kind of describe, because I'm a psychologist, like, I focus on development, so, like, I want to talk a bit about development of the kids. I think that's important because sometimes when kids face certain challenges in a certain time, we always ask the question, why are they doing this? And some of them has to do with their development age and the time that they're in. So it's important to kind of understand that. Then go over some of the specific challenges. Even I wanted to show you, like, how some of the social media outlets are. I mean, depending on how active somebody is, you might already know more about it, so it's not even like something. But I figured some parents might need to know more about, what things are. They just don't even know. And then how to be mindful and stuff. So for development, there's different models out there. The reason I'm going to go briefly over all of them is because all of them give us a certain, like, scope into how kids are at a certain age. And it's better to understand that. How old are your kids, if you don't mind asking?
15, 14, 10.
Okay, I see. So,
8, 14,
okay. and
No,
you're,
she's
I know. I mean,
17,
she's the youngest, so
17.
she's okay. So she's almost like technically an adult, American, at least standard wise. So the first one is the Freudian model, and the reason this model is kind of important is because, like, Sigmund Freud in psychology, he has a very, like, he calls it a psychosexual model, right? He talks about the sexual development of children, and some of his concepts, I mean, are not really in accordance with Islam, so we don't really believe in them, we don't accept them. But the point with this was that to understand that, according to him at least, and a lot of the earlier psychology, kids have an understanding of what sexuality is from a very young age. So according to his standard, up to from age 6 and on, children kind of begin to develop, some of these complexes and resolving them. And when he says complexes, it's the stuff that's kind of like contrary to Islam. Like he'll say that female, girls will have a sexual attraction towards their father, and boys will have a sexual attraction towards their mother. Again, that's something that you can't prove it. Again, it doesn't sound right, so we're not going to believe it. But the point is that it's early on. Because when we think, like, from our perspective, like I grew up in Pakistan for the first 10 years. People who grew up outside of this, they think like, oh, up to age 15, 16, or 18, kids don't even know anything about their sexual feelings or anything like that. And that's important to understand when we talk about social media, because a lot of the problems there happen because of that, the understanding. This is the model that I like to use, and I have it only up to stage 5. It goes up to stage 8, and this is something that we all should be kind of like conscious of. And so Erik Erikson has a whole model on kids' psychosocial development. And what's interesting in this model is that the very first stage is where children develop trust, right? And that's from age 0 to 1.5. So when we think of like my son who's now 1.5, we think like, how does this little kid know what trust is? But that's exactly when he's developing the trust. A lot of times, like when kids are older, parents ask the question, my kids won't come up to me and ask me or talk to me about certain things, problems that they're having. That's probably because you don't have that trust that they used to have with them, and that was never developed way early in the age, right? Way early, like when they were young. And so it's really important to understand that trust happens, the first step of any relationship between any two people is trust. If I can trust you, then I know that we can have a quality relationship. If I can, then it won't proceed anywhere. And kids do the same thing. After that, like, kids learn to become autonomous. Part of that is that when Erikson says if kids don't become autonomous, meaning doing things on their own, then they will learn how to become shameful. So, for example, especially in our Desi culture, kids start to do something alone, and the parents will say, "Don't do it." Like, what are you trying to do? Like, they always try to jump in. If someone becomes, even the next one tries to take on initiative, which is the third stage, like, okay, I want to, like, have this program or do this or go to that and try that. Parents will come in and shame them. And that's one of the key things we'll talk a little bit later, is that never shame your kids. Even if you have to, like, discipline them, do it in a way that they don't feel like shamed. They don't feel a lot of guilt on them. And the last stage, which is what I wanted to mention to you, because some of your kids between 12 and 18, is when they're developing an identity. And one of the problems with Muslim kids especially is that there's a lot of identities out there, right? So even in American kids, by the way, so it's not just unique to Muslims. When you look at American kids, at least they can say, okay, we're American, and that's their identity. Even then, they're confused. You go to high schools, like I went to Willowbrook, you have groups and cliques. Some of them are jocks and some of them are nerds, and these are all identities people develop. But within the Muslim population, you have like someone who's Muslim, someone who's Pakistani or Indian, or let's say like their parents are different culture, and you have different identities. And then something inside the house is different than what's happening in their neighborhood, what's happening in their society, and so that creates a lot of tension inside, because you're trying to like, okay, what am I? Am I Muslim? Am I Pakistani? Am I Indian? Am I Arab? Am I American? What does that mean to be American? And part of that identity development at that age is also the sexual identity. I mean, some people, this is where they begin to like, if they're so confused, they'll go and try different things, and then they'll be like, oh, I think I'm gay. Like that's where the thought comes in, because they're trying to develop who they are. And so for parents, for us, we have to be very mindful of having a good identity. And alhamdulillah, the good thing for us is we're Muslims. So we can say Islam is our identity, but we have to practice it too. Sometimes we'll say like, yes, we're Muslims and Islam should be the first thing, but something cultural will come in. Like we talk about marriage, for example, right? When should a person be married? Ideally, as soon as they're ready. But then sometimes, like in the Desi culture, not in the 20s and 30s, people don't think about marriage until they're like much later. I remember when I was 24, talked about marriage with my parents. They're like, yeah, why don't we wait a couple of years? And I was 24, so it didn't make any sense. The Prophet got married when he was, in his 20s. And so idea is that if you have one unique identity, which is Islam, keep it at that. It can avoid a lot of confusion, a lot of problems. This is another model by a French psychologist, Piaget. But this one has to do with their cognitive thinking. How their thinking in the beginning is very simplistic, but it gets more and more complicated. So the reason I have this up is because a lot of times kids will want to know why, right? So sometimes we'll say, don't do this, don't use Facebook, don't use. Well, they want to know why. A 2-year-old might be able to just take it at that. Okay, I'm not doing it because my father told me not to do it. But a 15-year-old is not going to take that in. They want to know exactly why. Like, you have to be able to make them understand from their perspective why this is harmful, why I shouldn't be using this, instead of just saying you can't use it. I think that's one of the key areas here. This development, there's a lot of different development models out there, by the way. This one talks about morality, and this is important because initially kids, when they go through a stage called pre-conventional, it's more about obedience because of punishment. So for example, little kids, you tell them, okay, I need you to go to sleep. Why? If you don't go out, you're going to get a timeout. So they'll do something because they don't want the punishment. They don't want the consequences, right? But as people become older, ideally it should be that we don't do it because this is Islam. We don't do it because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Little kids are not going to understand that. Sometimes we tell that to like a 7-year-old, you shouldn't do it because, Islam says not to do it. For him, that doesn't mean much, right? Especially in this day and age, kids aren't mature enough anyway. You tell a 10-year-old, a 15-year-old, by the way, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us not to, engage in, a relationship with other females. He's not going to understand that. That's like a very immature American child. He doesn't have that concept of what a conventional morality is. And that is there. So any questions on these so far? Like, I know I kind of like went through them really quickly, but I think if there's a key thing that you can get is that understand that development starts very early. Like some of these concepts are very, very early. I'm talking about at like age 3, 5. So if we have to be involved in a kid's life, it has to be very early. It can't be at like 16-year-old. Now you found out that he was doing something, Yeah, it's kind of too late. I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides, but in a psychological sense, it's very late. The Quran also talks about development in the Surah Hadid. اعلموا أنما الحياة الدنيا لعب ولهو وزينة وتفاخر بينكم وتكاثر في الأموال والأولاد. And what I want to get that out is that a lot of times, for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, know that this world is the life of this world is only play, amusement, show and boasting among yourselves, a quest for greater riches and more children. And so that stuff is also part of life, right? So like oftentimes, I think we had a discussion before, if I remember, about how people are so worried about their hair and their clothing, and at this age, there's an age when it's normal for people to worry about that, right? When the kids are young, they won't be, but I would say around maybe age 7 or 8, they begin to worry more about how they look. So, and like what other people will think about them if they dress up a certain way, and that's kind of like normal too. It's not like abnormal for someone to think that way. Now we're older. I mean, I'm dressed up because I'm presenting. But if I was not dressed up like this, I'm still presenting, maybe I wouldn't care much. But little kids at a certain age do care a lot about it. And after that, the next stage is when they're, when they want to have more things. So having more whatever, having a nice car, beautiful car, and these kind of like mesh together too. So showing off a nice phone, it's kind of like showing an adornment, like zina, and it's also having that notion of having more and more things that you want to have. So again, it's very normal. Skip through this. So identity development, like I said before, it's normal for every teenager. And we have to be able to guide them accordingly. And there's specific identities: religious, cultural, societal, family identity. Sometimes within a culture, you have different families that have different identity. And I don't mean like a caste system or something, which is kind of normal. But I mean like even the way we do things. What time do we go to bed? How do we eat? How do we talk amongst one another versus like my uncle's family? They might do things differently, right? These are all identities. And if they're different, then the child is going to be confused, naturally. And so we have to provide this kind of like a venue for them to have a good understanding. And then sexual identity as well. So, for them, the challenge is becoming an adult. I mean, technically, Islamically, a child is an adult as soon as they reach puberty. American standard would say, okay, 18 years of age. But even during that time, you can see this like the challenge is, okay, now I'm an adult. I can technically even have kids. What are my responsibilities? What am I supposed to do? High schoolers have the pressure of worrying about school, career, their grades. These are different pressures that are created. So one of the things that when I work with parents, they don't seem to understand is that it's very tough being a kid these days. It's not easy. We might think that it's a lot easier than the way we were because we had to walk a certain mile to go to school, or we had this much of homework and now you don't. But there's challenges during this time that we didn't have during our time. Or our parents didn't have during their time. So we have to be very mindful of those challenges as well. Talking about social media, one of the things I really want to talk about is this concept of desensitization. And this is one of the things that is like parents don't worry about early on, but they come in later on, they try to like tackle it. So what do I mean by that, right? So we'll just start with like kids programming. And I use kind of like phases here. So how does a person go into watching, say, looking at pornography or being openly talking to other, girls or guys? It starts with a very young age. This is a screenshot from Sesame Street. It's provocative. She's not dressed up. I mean, kids are looking at this, right? And this may be a bit too much. Maybe they're like most Sesame Street episodes are not like that. But the fact is that they're looking at girls, women that are not dressed appropriately. And so you're slowly moving. You see, like the way shaitan works, and we know the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that talked about the brothers in Bani Israel who left their sister with the most pious man, in the time, and how slowly it progressed into him, eventually committing zina, killing her, burying her. And so it's not supposed to be a quick thing. An 8-year-old, 7-year-old may or may not get introduced directly to pornography, but he's going to get introduced to these things. So that's one. And then Nickelodeon, right? The kids get a little bit older, again, like kissing boys, wearing clothes like that, looking at women that are wearing clothes, it becomes a normal thing for them. And so as slowly they progress, and at that time usually parents aren't watching, they're not looking at it, like what the kids are looking at. And then I have this. This is kind of like a high school, like you could say, the way girls are dressed up. So you're going very, very slowly up the ladder, and from that, if you get introduced to pornography, it's not going to be such a big jump for them, you see. And so because it was so, it's like if I asked you to run a mile today and you don't usually run, you're not going to be able to run. But if I said, okay, start with running, a quarter of a mile, and then do that for a week, and then do another like half a mile, then do 3/4, now do a mile, then it becomes easier to do that. So that's the desensitization. And sorry for the explicit images, but I wanted to kind of make that obvious. And then a television and video game. So this is a screenshot from a Grand Theft Auto video game, which is like a very common, popular game. But that's actually, there was the loading screen from that. I mean, it is what it is. And then I was looking for like images to show about TV shows, but they were like very dirty. But there was an article that popped up and caught my attention. It said, top 10 TV shows you shouldn't watch with your parents. Because and they understand that these things that parents are not going to be okay with. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So the problem is a lot of the quality shows nowadays will have a lot of exposure, like sexual content, it'll have aggressive content, and then harmful pop culture norms like smoking marijuana, normal, in a TV show. And so if you pick any TV show out there, that like if teenagers love like nowadays Arrow and these Flash and all these TV shows that are out there, and some of them if the parents don't, they're watching things like Game of Thrones, which is there's nudity in there. I mean, it's not even like there's nothing like no filter there at all. And same with video games. That's another issue with video games. So social media now, people a lot of times like say, well, social is it bad? Is it good? So ideally, if we were to say, okay, in the ideal world, we would have no social media. Wonderful. Okay, we can communicate face to face. We can talk. Having a culture in the house where there's no like screens. That's the ideal way. But let's face it, that's not going to happen easily, right? We all like I use a phone. My wife will use a phone. So kids know that that's kind of like part of our life, right? Even adults nowadays have Facebook. Everybody has a Facebook account. So having a life where nobody has a social media, that's not going to happen. But what we have to do is we have to understand that it's a good way to connect with people. There's, it's a tool that you can use for good, but there's a lot of harm in it as well. And the harm is like, you can communicate with other people. So, guys and girls will talk to one another over social media. Because it's not face to face, there's this less haya, because you're not showing your face, you're like, okay, well, it's not a big deal. It's like when you text somebody, you can't see them. And then you'll also access things on social media, even Facebook, that is dangerous and harmful that someone else put up. So I just went to like two, obviously this is not recent, like a little bit older, like Miley Cyrus and Justin Bieber, the type of stuff that they put up, like for our girls and guys to look at. It's not appropriate, right? This was just a screenshot I took yesterday from their past like photos. And so this is what they're getting exposed to. Other ones here, you have, like Tumblr and Snapchat and Instagram, I think I have, and Twitter. These areas. You can go on there and they have filters that you can turn off, and kids are getting exposed then now to, or teenagers now to things. So now, how many, like you guys here, I'm sure, do you have a Facebook account? Have you been exposed to?
Yeah.
So you understand what Facebook is, right? At least for the most part. What about like Twitter account? How about, do you know what a Tumblr is? Okay, so she understands Tumblr, right? Instagram, right? Nowadays, the two most popular are Instagram and Snapchat, right? Instagram and Snapchat are most popular. And I think the one thing that we have to be really mindful of. So I work with a client who has who has a pornography addiction, right? And he on his phone put up like all these security features and whatnot to make sure that he doesn't access any website. But he tells me that there are shortcuts that you can take through like Twitter or through Instagram or through other programs that can give you access to the content. So when he ends up looking at it and he comes back and he wants to delete those apps too, But again, that's the point. I don't mean to scare people here, but I don't want you to understand the dangers that are there. But the reaction has to be appropriate too. We can't like expect everybody to delete their apps and destroy their phones and then go back to the way things were. So I kind of wanted to, let's see if I can still share my screen here. So like for example with Snapchat, I have Snapchat. I mean, obviously I use it for some communication, but the good thing is you can also follow scholars, right? Like I follow Sohaib Webb. He snaps like every single day, pretty much, and that's good. Like he sends good reminders out. I don't know. I think he's talking about something here. Obviously the volume is not on here, but he'll have good reminders up. Some people ask him questions and he'll answer that. He snaps a lot. Like this is within like the last 4 hours he's put up a couple of videos. So if you don't understand the concept, obviously, I think, do you guys know how Snapchat works? Like, so a video or image that's sent, it gets deleted, right? It's not supposed to stay. And that's where the issue is. Unless they do a screenshot, but a video still doesn't get saved, right? So the idea is that it's something that you do. It's like, think of a sin that you may commit and it doesn't count. Like that's really the mindset is like, okay, well, this will cease to exist in 10 seconds, so I should maybe just do it. Like, what's the big deal? What's the harm in it? And parents won't be able to tell, like, oh my God, like, what kind of video did my son just watch or look at? Because it's gone by the time you look at their phones. And I want the reason I'm saying that is because a lot of times when people focus on oh wait, I didn't even have this on the screen. A lot of times when people focus on this was the Sohaib Webb thing I was telling you about. Controlling their kids, they don't look at the fact that you can't stop a lot of these things altogether. no matter what program you install on your network, and I'll tell you about a few of them, but no matter what you do, there's always a work around it. If you look at the Google terms that are being searched, it's always like, how to go around this and how to go around that firewall and how to get access to this without, with these blocks on. So you're not going to get them to completely stop. And that's not the focus of my presentation either. It's more like, how can we create a culture that's more about opening understanding. Obviously, WhatsApp is something that people use to communicate. Viber, Kik is a common one with kids. I don't know if you know about Kik. Yeah. So again, it's right. Middle school is a lot of the young ones. I don't know if you heard of Reddit, right? Like it's a website where people go and they put up. It has its own. It's a community, you can say. It has its like subreddits, right? So for example, there's a subreddit on Islam, and anyone can go up there and put up a. So let me show it to you. So this would be like a subreddit of Islam, right? So anyone can go up there, put up a post on Islam, and then people can upvote it or downvote it, right? And then so at the end of the day, all the top posts are like posting the front page. And so Reddit itself has a front page of its own. This is the Islamic subreddit. So if you just went to like all, for example, all the top posted top links are upvoted here, and people look at that. So I mean, most of the time, the front page, the first like 10 or 20 links are clean. It's just maybe something funny or some news article or some event that happened, like a bomb blast or something, and people post about it. But if you keep scrolling down, it gets dirtier and dirtier. And I'm not even going to click on some of these, but I mean, you can probably get, and it has a filter on its own. So there is a filter, but again, I mean, if somebody's looking for it, and there's a subreddit for even things that are like, like inappropriate. Like there's probably a subreddit for pornography. There's a subreddit for, each actress has its own subreddit, each actor has it, each like celebrity will have their own subreddit, and people go post things about them, pictures, videos, whatever it is. Yeah. So a lot of this stuff is not very appropriate. Like I said, if you go beyond page 1 into, like I said, page 2 or 3, you'll begin to see some things that are just not appropriate. Maybe I have a filter on, that's why I'm not seeing it. But I know for a fact that there's things that are just not appropriate down, and somebody's putting up like actress pictures and people are upvoting that. There's like, stuff about Donald Trump. A lot of stuff on here that's not appropriate. I think I do have a filter on, that's why I don't see any of the other ones. But in here you can tag something as like not appropriate, and when it gets tagged, then there's a filter. But if it doesn't get tagged, then there's no filter. So, but even then, if somebody's looking for it, this is a website they can easily get it. And then even YouTube, like a lot of times people think YouTube is safe because it won't have anything pornographic material on it, but there's a lot of pornographic material on YouTube, so it's not safe. So parents will might look at the history or something, which by the way, history can be, obviously you can go into private browsing mode and have it so that parents can't check their history. But parents will look at, it's just YouTube, but YouTube has a lot of garbage on there too. So it's not safe at all. Is basically the point I'm trying to get at here. The last one that I want to talk about is Tinder. I don't know if you guys know about Tinder. So it's basically like an online dating. It's an app. I don't have it. I'm not going to install it. And I'd like to show you how it is. I don't want to get yelled at by my wife, but it's a dating app. So the idea behind it was hooking up. It wasn't even about dating. It was like basically if you want to hook up with somebody, and you go on there and you see a picture, someone's age, and then you can swipe right or swipe left. No. So I think it connects with your Facebook, but you can swipe right or left, on it. And it tells you exactly, maybe it has a demo in here somewhere. And it will, if you swipe right, means you're interested. If you swipe left, it means you're not interested. If two people swipe right at each other, then you can talk to one another. That's the logic behind it. Yeah. So now what's interesting is there's a Muslim version called Minder, right? Yeah, there is. But the Minder one is actually meant for marriage, right? And what's interesting, I've done 2 pre-counseling sessions of couples who actually now married, and they met through Minder. So my impression of Minder was completely negative, and now it's kind of neutral. So again, Tinder wasn't meant to be clean or appropriate initially, at least. But you see, if you swipe right, two people do it, it'll tell you it's a match, and you can send messages to one another. And the idea was, again, behind it was this hooking up. It wasn't like, like any kind of, like, I don't know, appropriate way. But Minder is the Islamic version of Tinder. So, Minder, M like Muslim, like, yeah, Minder, like a Tinder for Muslims. Okay, so that's the thing, right? Like, you can't really stop it. Our goals, as doing like tarbiyah of the children, it should be at that, like, balance, right? So one extreme is when parents say, well, do whatever you want. Here's your phone, here's your iPad, open network. Obviously, that's not appropriate. The other end is where people are like, nothing, completely, like, no phone, take everything away. I was talking to one of my clients yesterday. He's an IFS student, by the way. And, he said, you can take my phone away, but I have two other phones. And then kids will get phones from somebody else. They'll get access. So that end of the spectrum is not good either. So it has to be a balance, right? So obviously there's some things that you're going to have to let your kids use. You have to let our kids use some things. But there has to be a balance on how we do it and the appropriateness of it. And so this... the behavioral, like the tarbiyah, the goal has to be, it has to be according to the personality factor. So what do I mean by that? For example, let's say my nephew has ADHD, right? So like some kids have some tendencies to be more, what's the term I'm looking for here? They don't think without, they don't do things and they don't think about it before doing it, right? They'll do things without thinking and very impulsive, right? That's the term I'm looking for. So, like, for example, ADHD has a side thing effect, which is being impulsive. And so somebody who's impulsive will most likely make a mistake. So our tarbiyah can't be like, zero tolerance policy for someone, especially most kids are impulsive, right? But some kids are more impulsive. So we can't expect like them to not make mistakes at all, right? They'll make a mistake. What you do afterwards is what matters. Type of parenting also has to be according to their type of personality. Some kids will respond more to strict parenting. Some will not respond at all. I mean, I'll have a recording for it, so it's not a big deal. No, it's not a big deal. Yeah. And then no problem. The location also matters too. So this is a saying by scholars. لا تربوا أولادكم كما رباكم آباؤكم لأنهم خلقوا لزمان غير زمانكم. Right. So like. And this changes, like, even like, so I grew up here in America in the 90s and early 2000s, and my kids are growing up now, just about 15, 20 years later. I mean, there's so much difference from then and now, and sometimes we see differences of, like, my father grew up in a rural Pakistani village in the 50s, so there's a huge difference. So we can't expect the same from our children, the way that we can't raise them the same way that our parents raised us. Because it's a different time. So the important thing is being a model. So what do I mean by that? Like, a lot of times parents will say, like, my kids use too much phone, and I want to stop them. And when I talk to the parents, they're using too much phone too. So if we want our kids to stop using screens, phones, whatever it is, TV, then we have to do it first. And that's the sunnah of Rasulullah too. Is that if you want someone to change, then you got to bring that. To yourself. And then, like I said earlier, having good behaviors from beginning, being consistent. So, and there's the hadith of Prophet that, the ahabul a'malu ila Allahi adwamuha wa in qalla, right? That the best, the most beloved deeds to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are the ones that are regular, consistent, even though they're little. So the change that we bring on, it has to be consistent and has to be like, even if it's little. So if we decide that we're not going to use any phones after 9 p.m., then we have to stick with it. Sometimes parents will go all out, and then after like 2 weeks or 3 weeks, then they're back to the way they were. So that tells the child that my mom's not consistent. She's going to change back to her way. And starting early. So I give two examples of like hijab and music. Like for example, music. We let our kids listen to music when they're young. And they're watching TV shows that have music in them. And all of a sudden, when they turn 12 or 13, we expect, no music now. Why? Because, you're older now. And that's not how it works. It has to start early. So disciplining-wise, obviously, beating kids is not good. Verbally abusive, insulting, degrading. Scholars concur that the best place if you have to lightly smack a child is on 2 hands or 2 feet, and that's like the most like kind of extreme how it should be. Sometimes parents nowadays, you see, like they'll like beat their kids, like viciously, and that's not good either. Sometimes negative discipline is done, like beating our kids is done, not because they deserve it, is because we don't get the respect that we feel like we deserve, so we kind of throw it onto the kids. There's a superiority. Sometimes it's a habit. We got beaten by our parents, so we're going to beat our kids. But again, we can't apply the same principles. Anytime we give a punishment, one of the things that parents don't do is they talk about afterwards of what happened. And that has to be a norm. So let's say a child did something wrong and you punish them. Afterwards, you have to talk to them about it. Like, okay, this is why I punished you. You understand why this happened, right? Why was this consequences this way? We can't expect them to just understand it, that they did something wrong. In fact, little kids don't even have a long memory span. So what we say in psychology is that if a child does something, like a 5-year-old, my 5-year-old, he did something, I can't be like, okay, tomorrow you're grounded. Because tomorrow is tomorrow. He won't know until like then, well, why am I grounded now? He won't understand the gravity of it. The punishment has to be immediate. The shortest amount of time that you have between a problem and a punishment, the more effective it is. And it has to be fair as well. So for example, someone does something and you're like, okay, you're grounded for a week. That's not a fair punishment. It has to be fair. It has to be according to what they did wrong. And then tell them how they could have done it differently. So I noticed that you kicked your cousin and you took the ball away. Next time, maybe you could have asked. If you had asked, I would not have punished you. So the child knows, why did I get punished? What could I do differently next time to get it wrong, to do it right? And then I said the middle path, right? So we say, like, in the technical term is dialectics, right? So two things that seem like opposites sometimes can both be true. And that's like a perspective issue. So for example, I'll come back to this slide. I show this to couples all the time, this image. Like if you look at from this side, and shine a light through here, you'll see an orange, square, right? And if you shine a light from here, you'll see a blue circle, right? But the fact is that both of them are true, right? So sometimes our kids and our spouses and whoever will have a perspective. Like, say their perspective on use of technology or use of Snapchat. Their perspective might be right. Like I said, on Snapchat you can follow scholars. On Instagram you can follow scholars and they'll post up good things, good advices. But on the other hand, you're also right. There's a lot of harmful things on there too. So there has to be a middle ground instead of trying to say, no, I'm right and you're wrong. That doesn't work with kids. It has never worked. I mean, the example I give, like people say, how can you be too strict or too lenient? Is the example of Prophet ﷺ, of course. وَالَّذِينَ مَعَهُ أَشِدَّاءُ عَلَى الْكُفَّارِ رُحَمَاءُ بَيْنَهُم, right? Those who were around him were strict on disbelievers, forceful, but they were merciful among themselves. So you don't always have to be strict everywhere or be kind everywhere. Sometimes, according to situations and people, you can change and flexible. This slide talks about parenting styles. So there's 4 different parenting styles that they talk about in psychology. And they say the best one is what they call a authoritative parenting. So what does that mean? It means that you have to have high demands from the kids, but you're also very responsive, right? So if you don't have any demands and you're not responsive at all, is what's called uninvolved parenting. That leads to kids that are unmotivated, kids that are indifferent, destructive, detached. If you have no demands and a lot of responsiveness, you give them too much love, you basically quote unquote spoil them, then what you're going to get is people who are impulsive, people who are very dependent, undisciplined. If you have too many demands from them and you have low responsiveness, you never praise them, when they do their things, you never appreciate anything that they do, then kids are going to be withdrawn, apathetic, shy with girls, hostile with boys, unmotivated and incompetent. So the best one is that there has to be a balance between the two. So yeah, I want good grades, but you know what? If once in a while if they don't get it, that's fine. You appreciate even like every day when they do their homework. Good job. It's not just like A's that I'm looking for. I'm looking for your effort. And you praise them for even.
They have A. Why don't you have A plus?
Yeah, that would not be appropriate, right? But if you kids and not just kids, adults actually love attention, right? If you give a positive attention to a child, then they're more likely to do more things to keep getting that attention or want more attention, right? So if you only give them attention when you get a report card, then that's not fair to them, and they're not going to do more. Also, emotions. Like somehow when we think that if we deal with emotions with our kids, we're making them weak, or it's not appropriate. Like we should be very logical, right? You do this and I do this, and this is how the world works. But it's not always like that. Research found that children raised by parents who value and guide emotions do better in many ways. They have stronger relationships, do better in school, handle their moods better, emotional events or handle emotional events more quickly, and they get sick less often. So even physically, it's better. Kids who are more in touch with their emotions rather than no, you have to do this, and this is how it's supposed to be. Empathy, like being empathic with children. Like for example, if they want something, I understand that you want this, but this is why we can't have it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this, or yeah, you want an Xbox and you already have a PlayStation, but you know what? There are kids out there that don't have it, and so this is why we're not gonna get it. So not just saying no, you can't have it, but empathizing with them. Exactly. And this is one thing that people don't do is showing love to children. Even smiling, for example, right? So I quote two hadith here. In one of them, the Rawi said, "Ma ra'aytu Rasulullah illa mutabassiman," that I didn't see Prophet except that he was smiling. Or Abdullah bin Harith said that, "Ma ra'aytu ahadan aktharu tabassuman min Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam." I didn't see anyone smile more than the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So showing them that love, if not, then somebody else will. And then last two slides. So this one is being forgiving. So when kids make a mistake, you can't hold it against them for the rest of their life, right? You have to find a way to let it go, no matter how big the mistake is. Like there has to be some mercy. If you don't send mercy to people in the world, Allah will not be merciful to you. And so there's a hadith of Prophet where he said, "May the mercy of Allah be upon the parent who helps his child in his obedience." And then the companion asked, "How, Ya Rasulullah?" He said, "By accepting his good gestures and overlooking his faults." So the parents can help the kids be more obedient if they only learn to overlook the mistakes that they make. So the last slide, take-home message, don't react too much, don't have too much. I mean, there are programs out there that you can install, and contact me, and I will email you the links and whatnot. But
You're too far to contact you.
hey, this is my contact information. But don't be too quick on responding to that. If they're having a problem, try to understand why the problem is happening, not what the problem is. Why is it that they're looking? Like for example, if somebody's looking at pornography, well, like going back to when they were being raised, like was this something that we kind of moved towards? How can we move away from it now, right? If they're talking to a girl, like what's going on here? Maybe they don't have a good relationship with you. They're with the family. And they're seeking that elsewhere. If they're not finding the comfort in you as a parent, they're going to try to find it somewhere else. And that might be the girl that they're talking to, for example, or the guy they're talking to. And empathizing with them, like I said before, and then connecting with them. It's good to have obviously a culture where families sit together to talk one another, they share problems, and no one's using a screen, no one's on Facebook, no one's on Instagram. But that's the ideal. So try to create that at least. Try to model the behavior. 9 out of 10 times, if you model the behavior, it will happen. I mean, this is the like even psychology in the Quran talks about it. Allah doesn't change the condition of people until they change themselves. When people change themselves, the condition automatically changes. It's like a system of Allah. And understanding the needs and pressures of the children too. There's a lot of pressure nowadays with kids, especially in high school. So we can't just underestimate that. And so that is my presentation.
We have in high school.
Brother Fahad, could you come and present to the